Mansa Musa, the wealthiest man in history, was so rich that his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 caused inflation in Egypt that lasted for years. His caravan, stretching across miles of desert, carried enough gold to shock the world. The sheer scale of his wealth was beyond anything anyone had ever seen, so much so that it sent shockwaves through entire economies. But how did this king, from the heart of Africa, amass such unimaginable riches? How did a man from a land few knew about create an empire that would change history forever? Mansa Musa's rise wasn't just about gold, it was about building one of the most influential empires in the world. From a humble beginning to commanding a vast and prosperous kingdom, his wealth and power transformed the Mali Empire into a cultural and intellectual powerhouse. His pilgrimage to Mecca wasn't just a religious journey, it was a global statement that put Mali on the map. And beyond the gold, Musa's reign brought education, architecture, and a rich legacy that still resonates today. But sustaining that kind of wealth and power wasn't without its challenges. Musa's empire faced battles, intrigue, and eventual decline, but his legacy stands as one of history's most extraordinary stories. The story of the Mali Empire begins long before Mansa Musa's reign, with a legendary figure who would be forever known as Sundiata Keita, the Lion King. Sundiata was a figure of prophecy, strength, and resilience. Born in the early 1200s, his early years were marked by hardship. He was born to a royal family, but his mother was exiled after being accused of witchcraft, and Sundiata himself was left weak and unable to walk for many years. Despite these challenges, Sundiata grew into a man destined to lead. In 1235, Sundiata faced his greatest challenge, the mighty Sasso Empire, ruled by Samaro Kanti. The Sasso Empire was rapidly expanding, and it threatened the Mandinka kingdoms of West Africa, including the lands where Sundiata's family held influence. The Battle of Karina was a turning point in African history. Sundiata's forces, though vastly outnumbered, defeated Samaro Kanti, and in doing so, Sundiata cemented his place as the founder of what would later become one of the wealthiest and most powerful empires in the world, the Mali Empire. Mali, located in what is now modern-day West Africa, was situated strategically along the Saharan trade routes. This gave the empire a natural advantage, connecting it to major trade networks that dealt in gold, salt, and ivory. Trade was central to Mali's economy, and as it grew, so did its influence, stretching across vast territories and linking powerful kingdoms. The Mali Empire wasn't just an economic force, it was also a cultural hub, a beacon of Islamic learning that attracted scholars from across the Islamic world. The Keita dynasty, to which Sundiata belonged, would go on to rule Mali for centuries. This dynasty was central to the empire's power, and Sundiata's descendants were tasked with preserving the legacy he had created. Under their rule, Mali became a center of wealth and culture, dominating West Africa. But this wasn't a smooth rise to power. The Mali Empire didn't emerge in isolation. Just before Mali's ascension, the Ghana Empire, a powerful kingdom that controlled much of the trade in gold and salt, began to crumble. Ghana's decline was due to a combination of factors: droughts, civil wars, and the growing influence of new trade routes that bypassed Ghana. In the power vacuum left by Ghana's fall, the Sasso Empire rose, led by Samaro Kanti, who initially posed a major threat to the Mandinka people. Sundiata's victory over Samaro at Karina wasn't just a military triumph, it marked the beginning of the Mali Empire, a force that would soon dominate the region. But Mansa Musa's story doesn't begin with him, it begins with those who came before him, who laid the groundwork for the mighty empire he would one day inherit. Fagale, Musa's father, played a significant role in the early years of Mali's growth. Fagale was a man of action, involved in military campaigns and playing a part in expanding the empire's territory. However, Fagale never became Mansa himself. He was a military leader and a key supporter of the empire's early military conquests, but his rise to the throne was overshadowed by the fierce power struggles within the Keita family. This would be a pattern in the Keita dynasty, where succession wasn't always straightforward. Fagale's father, Abu Bakr, was the one who had supported Sundiata Keita during the foundational years of the Mali Empire. Abu Bakr's involvement was crucial. He acted as Sundiata's second-in-command, or Kankorosigwe, a title that meant he was Sundiata's chief military advisor, deputy, and essentially his right-hand man. Abu Bakr's military prowess and political influence were instrumental in ensuring the success of the Mali Empire during its earliest years. His support was essential in the formation of a unified empire, and it was his bloodline that would go on to produce multiple Mansas, including Musa. Not much is known about Kanku, Musa's mother. While her role remains somewhat mysterious, we do know that women in the Mali Empire played critical roles in society, from crafting and medicine to managing households and supporting their husbands. In Kanku's case, she likely helped manage the complex social and political structure of the royal family, although the details of her life remain largely undocumented. However, it is clear that women like her were often culturally influential, shaping the daily lives of the empire through their involvement in traditional practices like craft making, pottery, and even medicinal knowledge. But after the death of Sundiata Keita in 1255, the Mali Empire was left with a massive void. Sundiata had built the empire from the ground up, but his death opened the door for a succession crisis. Without clear, universally accepted rules for inheritance, the Keita dynasty was soon thrown into a bitter battle for power. The empire, vast and sprawling, was now up for grabs. At the center of this conflict were Mansa Uli, Wadi, Khalifa, and Sakura, each vying for control over Mali. Mansa Uli, the son of Sundiata, initially succeeded his father, but his reign was short-lived. Uli's pilgrimage to Mecca around 1268 was a significant event, but upon his return, he died under mysterious circumstances in 1270, creating a political vacuum that fueled the power struggles. Next came Wadi, Uli's adopted brother, who briefly ascended to the throne. Wadi's reign, however, was marked by political instability and growing unrest across the empire. With regional leaders and local governors growing increasingly dissatisfied, Wadi's rule lasted only 4 years before he died in 1274. This left the empire in turmoil, as Khalifa, another claimant to the throne, seized power. Khalifa's rule was unpopular, and after just 2 years, he was overthrown by a powerful Great Council, which had grown weary of constant leadership changes. After Khalifa was removed, a new contender for the throne appeared, Sakura, who some accounts suggest was either a royal insider or even a former slave, although his status remains unclear. Sakura was able to briefly secure control of the throne and lead the empire from 1285 until his death in 1300. His reign was marked by military conquests that extended the empire's territory, but just like his predecessors, he faced mounting resistance from within the court and from regional powers who were growing more independent. It was during this period of constant upheaval and power struggles that Mansa Musa emerged. Musa, in his 20s, had already taken on important roles within the royal court and was gaining experience in governance and military affairs. As the empire continued to struggle with leadership transitions, Musa would soon find himself in a position to take charge. However, in 1312, a pivotal moment occurred when Muhammad ibn Chu, the Mansa at the time, embarked on an audacious expedition to the Atlantic Ocean, hoping to expand the empire's territories. Muhammad ibn Chu, fascinated by the idea of reaching new lands, sent a fleet of 400 ships to explore the unknown waters. The expedition was bold, but disastrous. Most of the fleet was lost, and only one ship made it back, the captain reporting that they had encountered a strange, powerful current that was likely the end of their journey. With Muhammad ibn Chu's disappearance, the leadership of Mali was suddenly thrown into chaos once again. As the Mali Empire faced a power vacuum, Musa found himself stepping into a leadership role. He was appointed as the regent, taking control of the empire in the absence of the Mansa. At this moment, Musa's diplomatic, military, and governance skills were put to the test. The Great Council, which had played such a crucial role in previous transitions of power, supported Musa's leadership, seeing him as a stabilizing force. Musa understood that this period was crucial. The Mali Empire was vast, with many regional powers and governors who had more local authority than ever before. To maintain control, Musa relied heavily on his political savvy. He worked hard to ensure that he had the backing of the Great Council, the governors, and the military leaders, knowing that stability was essential for the survival of the empire. By carefully balancing the interests of the different factions within the empire, Musa solidified his position as the true leader of the Mali Empire. But Musa's success wasn't just about securing political alliances. It was also about managing the empire's economic and military strength. Under his regency, the Saharan trade routes flourished, allowing Mali to retain its position as a hub for gold, salt, and other valuable commodities. Musa also focused on strengthening the military, ensuring that Mali remained protected from internal revolts and external threats. Musa was deeply aware of the empire's fragile nature. He knew that it wasn't just about ruling from the capital, but also ensuring the loyalty of the provinces and the regional powers. Through strategic marriages, diplomatic outreach, and careful military decisions, Musa ensured the loyalty of the various territories within his empire. The turning point came when Musa was formally recognized as Mansa. This wasn't just a title, it was a signal to the entire empire and the world that Musa had consolidated power. It marked the beginning of a new era in the Mali Empire, one where wealth, culture, and military might would be leveraged to bring about monumental expansion. By the time Musa was formally crowned as Mansa, he had already laid the groundwork for the next phase of Mali's imperial growth. He had stabilized the empire, maintained the prosperity of its trade routes, and secured the support of the empire's various factions. This solidified his legitimacy and gave him the foundation he needed to rule with authority. As the new Mansa, Musa was not just a figurehead. He was a leader determined to take Mali to greater heights. Under his reign, Mali would become one of the wealthiest and most powerful empires in the world. Musa's diplomacy, leadership, and military prowess would soon propel him into history as a ruler who changed the course of not only West African history but global history itself. Musa's ascension to the throne marked the beginning of a golden age for Mali. But it also signaled a period of great transformation. Under his rule, Mali wouldn't just grow, it would flourish, leaving an indelible mark on the world stage. The Mali Empire was about to enter its most prosperous era, and Mansa Musa was the man who would lead it. Mansa Musa's wealth didn't just come from luck or inheritance, it was built on the very heart of the Mali Empire's economy, the gold and salt trade. The Mali Empire, situated in West Africa, was perfectly positioned to dominate these key trade routes that spanned across the Saharan desert. These routes weren't just important for the empire, they were central to the whole Mediterranean world and beyond. Gold was the backbone of Mali's wealth. The empire controlled some of the richest gold mines in the world, particularly around Bambuk and Ouangara. The gold extracted from these mines flooded the global market, making Mali a prime player in the global economy. But gold wasn't Mali's only treasure. Salt, the precious mineral that people in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East would pay a fortune for, was just as valuable. Salt was critical in the preservation of food and was used in everyday life. Mali controlled salt mines in places like Tagaza, where salt was extracted and traded throughout the region, enriching the empire even further. The cities that were central to this empire, Gao, Oualata, and Timbuktu, became thriving hubs of commerce. These golden cities were vital to Mali's economy, serving as meeting points for traders from across Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Timbuktu, in particular, became famous for its scholarship, but it was also a trade center, where merchants exchanged gold, salt, and other commodities. Gao and Oualata, too, became powerful cities in their own right, contributing to Mali's unparalleled wealth. Now, as for Musa, his wealth was vast. As the Mansa of Mali, Musa had total control over all the gold in the empire. This was no metaphor, all gold nuggets within the borders of Mali were considered to be the property of the Mansa. This gave him absolute control over the empire's wealth, ensuring that Musa's personal fortunes were beyond comprehension. He didn't just benefit from Mali's riches, he was the source of its golden glory, and every nugget extracted from the mines added to his already unimaginable wealth. But Musa's wealth wasn't limited to just gold. No, the Mansa controlled a number of key resources that put him in a league of his own. Ivory, slaves, and other precious goods were also part of the empire's rich offerings. Slavery in Mali wasn't like what we think of in other parts of the world, but it was still a crucial part of the economy. The trade in slaves helped build the empire's infrastructure, as people were often used for mining, military service, and domestic work. Musa didn't just hoard his wealth, he leveraged it. His empire was built on peaceful trade routes, something that ensured the prosperity of his kingdom. The safety of merchants was guaranteed under Musa's rule, and in return, these merchants would bring in luxurious goods from around the world. The Saharan trade routes were vast, linking North Africa to the Mediterranean, and Sub-Saharan Africa to the Arab world, allowing goods like silks, spices, and textiles to flow freely into the empire. Musa's control over this trade gave him the ability to amass even more wealth, reinforcing his dominance over the region. But Musa knew that wealth wasn't just for personal gain. He used it to build alliances, fund cultural projects, and solidify his status as a global leader. By sponsoring massive building projects like mosques, universities, and libraries, Musa ensured that his legacy would be tied to the prosperity of the empire long after his reign. His wealth was a tool, one that he used not just to build his own fortune, but to cement Mali's place in the world as an economic, cultural, and political power. Musa's wealth allowed him to do things that no ruler had done before. He used his fortune to fund massive building projects that transformed cities like Timbuktu and Jen. The Djinguereber Mosque in Timbuktu became one of the most iconic structures in West Africa, drawing scholars and pilgrims from all over. This mosque was just one example of how Musa used his wealth to foster culture and learning. The University of Sankore, located in Timbuktu, became a global center for Islamic scholarship and one of the most prestigious universities in the world at the time. Musa's wealth also enabled him to invest in the arts, culture, and education. Mali became a place of learning, attracting scientists, astronomers, mathematicians, and artists from across the Islamic world. Timbuktu became famous not just for its gold, but for its role in spreading Islamic knowledge throughout West Africa and beyond. Musa understood that wealth wasn't just about material possession, it was about creating a legacy, and that legacy would be anchored in education and culture. However, Musa's wealth didn't come without consequences. In 1324, Musa set out on his famous Hajj to Mecca, and the sheer scale of the golden caravan he led caused shockwaves throughout the world, particularly in Egypt. Musa wasn't just a wealthy ruler, he was about to show the world the true scale of his riches. The preparations for the Hajj were massive. Musa wasn't just bringing himself, he brought an entourage unlike any the world had ever seen. Over 60,000 people traveled with him across the Saharan desert. His caravan wasn't just a group of travelers, it was a mobile city, with an army of soldiers, servants, merchants, and scholars accompanying him. The logistics of organizing such a massive operation were breathtaking. There were 8,000 soldiers for protection, countless camels to carry supplies, and of course, gold, Musa's most famous and abundant treasure. When Musa arrived in Cairo, he generously distributed gold to everyone he encountered, from the poor to the wealthy merchants, officials, and even the local sultan. As a result of Musa's lavish gold gifts, the economy in Cairo was thrown into turmoil. The inflation caused by the sudden influx of gold caused prices to soar, and gold itself became devalued in Egypt. This wasn't a temporary problem, it lasted for years. The effects of Musa's generosity were felt long after he had left Egypt, showing the magnitude of his wealth and the impact it had on economies far beyond his borders. The consequences of Musa's wealth didn't just stop with Egypt. His actions in Cairo spread word of his golden empire throughout the Islamic world, sparking interest from traders, scholars, and even other rulers. Musa didn't just buy respect, he commanded it. And while Egypt's inflation was a short-term consequence of his wealth, the long-term impact was that the world took notice. Mali became a hub for trade, culture, and intellectual achievement, and Musa's name was known across the Mediterranean, Arabia, and beyond. But Musa's wealth wasn't just about gold or trade, it was about the power it brought. It allowed him to dominate the Saharan trade routes, secure alliances through strategic marriages, and ensure that Mali's influence reached across the world. Musa's empire was untouchable, not just because of its riches, but because of its economic prosperity, military might, and the cultural renaissance he fostered. In the end, Mansa Musa's wealth wasn't just about the gold he possessed, it was about how he used it to transform his empire, shape history, and create a legacy that would echo for centuries. From the golden cities of Gao, Walata, and Timbuktu, to the vast trade routes that brought goods from across the world, Musa's empire became a symbol of opulence, learning, and power. And it all began with the legendary wealth that set the world's attention firmly on Mali. Timbuktu, during Musa's reign, became a cultural beacon, a place where knowledge, learning, and diverse intellectual traditions converged. While it had already existed as a settlement for centuries, under Musa, Timbuktu transformed into one of the most prestigious cities in the Islamic world and beyond. It became a center of scholarship, known for its libraries, universities, and its role as a meeting point for thinkers, philosophers, and scholars from all corners of the globe. One of the key reasons for this transformation was Musa's commitment to learning. As a devout Muslim, Musa recognized the importance of Islamic scholarship. He believed in the power of education as a means to strengthen his empire and bring greater prosperity. So, he didn't just invest in physical infrastructure, he invested in the intellectual infrastructure of his empire. Timbuktu became the heart of this intellectual movement, home to one of the greatest universities of the time, the University of Sankore. The University of Sankore was more than just a place for Islamic studies. Under Musa's patronage, it became a crossroads of knowledge, attracting scholars from across the Islamic world, including North Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. It wasn't just a university, it was a hub for intellectual exchange, where scholars debated, wrote, and studied the most pressing matters of the time, including astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy. The establishment of libraries in Timbuktu further solidified the city's reputation as a world-class center of learning. These libraries housed thousands of manuscripts, and Timbuktu became synonymous with learning and knowledge. Scholars from places like Cairo, Baghdad, and Fez flocked to Timbuktu to study, teach, and exchange ideas. This influx of intellectual talent made the city a true melting pot of culture, and it is no surprise that Timbuktu came to symbolize the intellectual golden age of West Africa. But Musa's contributions weren't confined to just education. His visionary leadership extended into the realm of architecture, where he played a crucial role in transforming the physical landscape of his empire, particularly in the city of Timbuktu. One of his most remarkable contributions to Islamic architecture was the Djingarubber Mosque, which became an iconic symbol of the Mali Empire. This mosque wasn't just a place of worship, it was a statement of power, devotion, and culture. The Djingarubber Mosque was constructed using mud bricks and adobe, materials that were abundant in the region. Its distinctive design, with sharp minarets and a flat roof, became the standard for mosques in the Sahel region. The mosque's intricate wooden beams, terracotta tiles, and decorative designs set it apart from other mosques across the Islamic world. But beyond its aesthetic appeal, the Djingarubber Mosque represented Musa's commitment to Islam and his desire to make Timbuktu a spiritual center as well as a cultural one. Not far from Timbuktu, Musa also contributed to the Great Mosque of Djen, another marvel of Islamic architecture. This mosque, which remains one of the largest mud brick structures in the world, was built using a style that was influenced by traditional West African building methods. The Great Mosque became not just a religious site, but also a symbol of Mali's dominance and its commitment to Islamic culture. The architectural style that Musa helped promote shaped the entire Sahelian region and can still be seen in the mosques and buildings of the region today. The University of Sankore in Timbuktu wasn't just a place for theological study, it was a place where students learned how to read and write in Arabic, which was an essential skill for anyone who wanted to participate in the empire's cultural and economic life. As a result, literacy rates in Mali grew dramatically under Musa's rule, and the ability to read and write in Arabic became widespread among the elite and even some of the general population. The Arabic script was used for everything from legal documents to literature, and it became an important tool for preserving history and recording knowledge. Mansa Musa was not just a ruler who built an empire through wealth and cultural achievements, he also ensured its survival and expansion through a powerful military. The Mali Empire, under Musa's rule, was a military powerhouse, and Musa utilized his military strength to both protect his empire and expand it far beyond its original borders. At the heart of Mali's military was its elite cavalry, an imposing force that could strike fear into any invader or competitor. The Malian cavalry was known for its speed, discipline, and advanced tactics. With 10,000 elite horsemen at his command, Musa's cavalry could rapidly mobilize and defend the empire's vast territories. But it wasn't just the cavalry that made Mali's military powerful, it was the sheer size of the army. Musa's military force, which reportedly numbered up to 100,000 soldiers, was a well-organized, formidable fighting force. These soldiers weren't just there for show, they were trained to protect the trade routes, maintain internal stability, and expand Mali's influence through conquest. But after Mansa Musa's death in 1337, the once mighty Mali Empire began to face a series of challenges that would eventually lead to its decline. Despite Musa's best efforts to build a stable empire, the power struggles that followed his death quickly revealed the fragility of the empire's political structure. The first major hurdle came with the succession. Musa's son, Magan, inherited the throne, but he lacked his father's charisma and military skill. His reign was marked by weak leadership and a failure to maintain the empire's unity. While Musa's military conquests had expanded the empire to its peak, Magan's rule failed to hold on to those vast territories, and he couldn't manage the internal divisions that began to emerge. His inability to maintain control over the governors and regional leaders led to discontent, and the empire's economic strain only exacerbated the problem. Gold, which had once flowed in abundance, became harder to mine, and trade routes began to suffer as Mali's dominance in the region slipped away. Next in line was Suleiman, another one of Musa's heirs, but he, too, couldn't hold the empire together. Suleiman's reign saw growing political divisions within the empire, as regional governors began to assert more autonomy, leading to a weakened central authority. Mali's once unified system started to unravel, and the wealth that had supported the empire's power began to shrink. While the gold mines were still valuable, their decline, coupled with poor management and corruption, caused an economic downturn. The Songhai Empire, which had been a part of Musa's empire, started to rise as a competing power. The Songhai people, under leaders like Sunni Ali and later Askia Muhammad, began to challenge Mali's dominance, seizing key territories and trade routes. As Songhai grew stronger, Mali's weakened position meant that the once great empire could no longer defend its borders or maintain control over its vassal states. By the end of the 15th century, Mali had lost its strategic control over key regions, and its once unified empire had fragmented into a collection of smaller kingdoms. The glory days of Mansa Musa's rule seemed distant, and the empire that had once been the envy of the world was now a shadow of its former self. The decline of the Mali Empire didn't happen overnight, but by the mid-16th century, its fate was sealed. External invasions and internal power struggles were the final nails in the coffin of an empire that had once been unstoppable. The most significant external threat came from the Moroccans. In 1591, the Moroccan army launched an invasion that dealt a crushing blow to Mali's weakened defenses. Morocco, eager to control the golden trade routes and expand its influence in West Africa, sent a highly disciplined army into Mali. The Moroccan forces, armed with gunpowder, were able to defeat the Malians, who had been relying on their traditional military strength and cavalry. The fall of Timbuktu to the Moroccans in 1591 was a devastating blow, as the city had once been the intellectual and cultural heart of Mali. The loss of Timbuktu, along with other key cities, left Mali vulnerable and scattered. Internally, the political fragmentation continued. Mali's once centralized power had devolved into a feudal system, with local rulers governing smaller regions without any real loyalty to the central government. This decentralization made it impossible for the empire to defend itself against external threats or to maintain the unity it had under Musa's rule. The golden age of Mali had come to an end, and it was now divided into smaller kingdoms that lacked the resources and unity to fend off invaders or maintain the empire's former greatness. By the time the Moroccan forces withdrew in the late 16th century, Mali's empire was no more. It had been reduced to a series of smaller, fragmented kingdoms that couldn't hold on to the vast territories and wealth Musa had once controlled. Songhai, the very power that had once been part of the Mali Empire, eventually absorbed what was left of Mali's territories and became the dominant empire in the region. Mali's decline was a combination of internal strife, external invasions, and the failure to maintain the unity and prosperity that had once made the empire so formidable. The once great empire that stretched across West Africa had finally fallen, and by the early 17th century, it was no longer the dominant power in the region. The legacy of Mansa Musa, however, remained. His wealth, his cultural achievements, and his leadership continued to echo in history, even as the empire he built crumbled. Mansa Musa's wealth has become almost mythical in its scale. When we talk about Musa's fortune, it's hard to grasp the full extent of his wealth. Estimates of his net worth, adjusted for inflation, reach a staggering $400 billion, placing him ahead of modern billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. But what does that number actually mean? Imagine owning more gold than any person in history, gold so abundant it could control economies, shift trade patterns, and influence entire nations. But Musa's legacy doesn't just reside in the past, it continues to influence West Africa today. The intellectual advancements he championed, the architectural masterpieces he funded, and the political alliances he built still echo in Mali's cultural and economic landscape. Timbuktu's status as a symbol of intellectual pursuit and Islamic heritage owes much to Musa's commitment to learning and the arts. His golden age gave birth to a tradition of education and knowledge that would inspire future generations. So, what do you think? Is Mansa Musa one of the most important figures in history, not just for his wealth but for his vision and impact? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think Musa's reign has shaped Africa today? We'd love to hear your reflections on this extraordinary man and his empire. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.